Welcome everyone. My name is Angela Merzen and I am a Connecticut State National. And what I'm going to be talking about today is what American State National means and how all of you can get involved. This is a take action time in our lives. This is not the time to be sitting back and waiting for others to lead. We all have to participate. And so one of the most important ways that we can participate is in being part of the very original government that our founders intended that is currently in the process of restoration. Just so you know, there is an assembly based on the original constitutions and our founding fathers' design in all 50 states already. We are already here. And so I'm proud to say today that we're reachable, we're findable, and you can, reach out and touch us anytime to get more information about becoming part of restoring our original government. So right off the bat, I want to just point out our website. I'm part of the Connecticut State Assembly, Land and Soil Jurisdiction. We're going to talk a lot today about jurisdiction and what that means and how critical. This is like the missing piece of the puzzle that most patriots need to really affect change in our country and certainly on our states. So our website, ConnecticutStateNationals.org, that's our specific website for Connecticut. And then we have 3 coordinators who work with our Federation of States. And the Federation is basically our head of state, our fiduciary, our justice, and they have a team of people that are working, they've been working for decades, gathering factual information on the history of our country, the true history, not the history you get in public schools, and giving that information to us and helping us to lawfully and peacefully restore our original constitutional government. So the way to reach our coordinators on Connecticut is also up here, Connecticut-coordinator at mail.americanstatenationals.us. And again, our website is another way to go through and do that as well. Okay, so I want to start with a little bit about language. Basically, our entire English language has been hijacked and redefined in such a way that it's virtually impossible for us to even know when we're being deceived. This is a huge issue. We think we understand the meaning of words, but we don't understand that actually we are speaking the language of an incorporated government and an incorporated system without even realizing it. So let's just talk about what a sovereign citizen is. First of all, on our assemblies, on the land and soil, we are not, quote unquote, sovereign citizens. That specific pair of words has been usurped and misused to a huge extent. In fact, now it has a negative connotation and is typically used to point out people who are perhaps lawless or perhaps more vigilante-based or terrorists. That is how our current de facto government uses this term, sovereign citizen. Now, while both of those words separately have great value, together they're basically an oxymoron. There is no such thing as a sovereign citizen, at least not on the land and soil jurisdiction. So, you may encounter law enforcement officers, for example, or judges in court who will refer to people who are sovereign citizens as if that is something to condemn. And so we don't use that term on the land and soil. We are sovereign. The truth is, all of us on America are born sovereign. When your feet hit the ground, you are sovereign. And that is stolen from you. So we'll go over that in a couple of minutes. But the term sovereign citizen together, we want to avoid that. We'll also talk a little bit about what sovereignty really means and how to live it. because that's a really important concept. We also have citizens on the land and soil, but our citizens are basically people who have gone through some extra steps to be eligible for running for office or taking leadership roles that are elected within the land and soil jurisdiction. So I want to emphasize that all these assemblies on the land and soil jurisdiction are peaceful. This is very important. We are lawful, peaceful people who follow the laws of God and the laws of nature's God. And that is very important because it's a moral code that is the founding fathers' moral code. And it's what they lived in their lives as they sought their own freedom and tried to retain it, to get away from monarchies and tyranny and dictatorships. They lived their lives under the laws of God and nature's God. And so that's what we're going to be doing in restoring common law and public law instead of statutory law, which is what we currently are all, unfortunately, subject to if we're not on the land and soil. So we keep the peace, we uphold the law, and we treat anyone who works for the de facto government with respect. They are people, they are living people, they may not know or understand the scope of what they're participating in. So we, as members of the Connecticut Assembly, we make efforts to educate and to reach out and communicate, but not to be belligerent, angry, or in any way, aggressive. That's not what we're looking for here. Okay, so here's a little factoid type thing. Did you know that the United States has been bankrupt multiple times? And these are the years that the country actually declared bankruptcy, the most recent being 2017. And each of those times our incorporated government, or at least following the Civil War in 1863, our incorporated government reorganized itself with each of those bankruptcies and developed more and more sub-corporations within the government. All of them are for profit. All of them are corporate entities within our current government as you know it. Another little factoid, did you know that the United States of America has two flags? One is a wartime flag. We know that as Old Glory. Most of us have pledged allegiance to it at some point in our lives, if not all our lives. And then there is a civil peacetime flag, and that's the one shown at the bottom right here. So the peacetime flag is the flag of the land and soil jurisdiction. We are Americans who are not at war with anyone. And in fact, upon the standing of all the assemblies, that was the first proclamation made that we proclaimed peace and that there would be an understanding with the whole world that we are at war with no one and we seek peaceable relations, including relations with our subcontractor incorporated government. Another factoid, did you know you're probably not a U.S. citizen if you can answer no to any of these? So do you live in American Samoa, Guam, or American Virgin Islands? Do you work for the federal government? If you say yes, then technically you are a U.S. citizen and you do have some obligations under that. If you don't serve in the military, if you're not in a political office, if you've not been granted political asylum and so on, these are all things. If you're not any of these, you are not actually a U.S. citizen. You are an American. We've been lied about to us about all of this. So where did this all start? Your identity was stolen at birth with the birth certificate. And, we could go into a whole thing about just this alone, but this is how the incorporated government incorporates every living man and woman very soon in life, shortly after you're born, and it's done without your knowledge, without your consent, and without your parents' knowledge and consent. So when I was born, my parents didn't know that when they registered my birth and then filled out a birth certificate, they didn't know that they were giving up my land and soil sovereign state and giving me over to the incorporated government to do whatever they want with my name. And so on paper, I'm dead, according to the current incorporated government. I'm dead. I was born, and with the birth certificate, I was lost at sea, I'm dead. And with that, they can take my name and create all sorts of commerce in my name, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. So US citizens are property. So that's what happened with the birth certificate. I was made a US citizen without my knowledge, and I am property. So I can be forced, my name can be forced into contracts that I have no knowledge of because my name is incorporated. And so waking up and realizing this means that I can actively change that, and I can revoke that status. So basically, the federal government as it stands right now is our employee. And the way that works, well, we'll go more into that as well, is living men and women are the top of the power structure. And our government is supposed to be the bottom of the power structure. That's the way it's supposed to work. But through generations of re-indoctrination and brainwashing and trickery and fraud, we believe that the government has power over us. And we've become pretty powerless in a lot of our behavior in complying with all of this. So technically, if we can wake up and use our, a lot of you folks are probably waking up, recognizing your true power, then you'll see that the federal government is supposed to be our employee. And that the constitutions that were originally written were meant to be policy manuals to dictate to the government subcontractor, here's what you're allowed to do. And I think this is, again, one of the biggest mindset shifts that I certainly had to go through as I learned who I truly am. And that is that I'm actually above any employee or elected official within the federal government. And I actually, through these constitutions, get to limit the powers of my contracted government. They're my service provider. So the 19 enumerated powers of the original Constitution are critical. They don't allow for things like a Department of Education, a Department of Environmental Protection. There are so many overreaches, and I'm sure all of you are nodding your heads right now and saying, absolutely, I know the government has overreached. Well, if we can step back a little bit from the Constitution, and instead of just pointing to it as a document that enumerates our rights, it's in fact really a policy manual that dictates the limits of our government contractor. It's a very different thing to look at it that way. Our rights come from the Creator, and the Creator only. That is it. And the Declaration of 1776 says all of that. It says these are the rights. We have the right to pursue happiness. We have the right to freedom. And when we forget that, and we allow our government to overextend its enumerated powers, all of a sudden we're saying, oh, you violated our rights. You're not following the Constitution that gives us our rights. And the Constitution doesn't give us our rights. Again, very important difference. The Creator gives us our rights. The Constitution essentially gives our government its limit of power. And what we want to do on the land and soil is simply say to the government subcontractors, go back into that role of limited powers. So we are not looking to overthrow anything. We are not looking for disruption of peace in our lives. What we're looking for is to educate the incorporated government, federal and state, educate them, explain to them that they need to get back into following the Constitution and their role as delineated in the Constitutions, and then we can self-govern at a local level, and so we'll talk more about that. Another little factoid that sort of wakes people up and makes people a little more interested in listening to this issue of land and soil jurisdiction is about income tax. So the IRS and the Federal Reserve are private corporations. Pretty much every three-letter agency you can name is a private corporation. They're all for profit. They are not interested in you. They don't even see you as living. Again, you're a number, you're a corporate name. That is all you are. You are an asset. You are a creditor. They don't see you as a living, breathing man or woman. So if, again, the federal government and its subgroups like the IRS are our employees and we are not U.S. citizens, so if I don't work for the military, if I don't work for the federal government, I'm not subject to their regulations or their laws unless, again, I work for them. So if I am earning my income driving a truck or cutting someone's hair or sweeping out, bathrooms, whatever, I do not have to pay federal income tax for that because I am not a U.S. citizen in that capacity. And this is real. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to really think about this piece of the puzzle. Because we as state nationals, we all declare our corrected status. We say, okay, we're leaving this municipal government, this incorporated government, this status I have as a U.S. citizen. I'm leaving that. I'm stepping over here back to the land where my feet landed when I was born, where my rights come from the Creator, and I am not subject to your taxation, which then you as the subcontractor government, you use to wage war and do all kinds of damage in the world without my consent. And so it's important to remember that when you pay federal income tax, you are contributing to the rogue behavior of the federal government. And it is very important, I think, to think twice about, how do you feel about participating in that? And the truth is, it's completely lawful for you to step out of that, voluntarily withdraw yourself from the income tax system, as long as you are not a U.S. citizen. And we have a way to do that. So using our website, for example, you can go look up the paperwork that we do, but we declare ourselves publicly to be removed from that system, and we all write letters and send them to the IRS and to the Internal Revenue Service, because yes, there are two different corporations that collect our tax forms and deal with our taxes. So we write letters to both of those agencies, and we let them know. We're not asking, we're telling you. We've realized who we are now. We're on the land. We are not in the jurisdiction of the municipal government as a U.S. citizen anymore. I am an American. And as an American who's not a U.S. citizen, I do not have to pay federal income tax. Thank you very much. I'm done with you. We all send letters like that to the IRS. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that we do not get thrown in jail. We do not get threatening letters from the IRS. I, in fact, and my friend Gail here is going to chime in too, but I have a letter that I got back from the IRS when I sent my letter revoking paying my taxes. So this says, IRS, right on the top, addressed to me. It says, thank you for your inquiry of April 29, 2022. So last year, that's when I sent my letter. I did not have an inquiry, by the way. I had a statement and a proclamation, but they phrase it as if I had an inquiry. We're working on your account. However, we need an additional 60 days to send you a complete response on what action we are taking to your account. Okay, so basically, they're telling me they need 60 more days to think about the statement that I made to them. Now, this letter came to me, what's the date on this? I think this came to me last July. So I sent my letter to the IRS in April, got this letter back in July. So now it's February of 2023. I have heard nothing else from the IRS. So even though I have presented them with my declaration that I'm no longer paying taxes, they know my name, they know my social security number, I am publicly declaring this, no one has come knocking at my door. This is the only letter I've received. Now, other state nationals on our state have had actually additional letters sent to them. And maybe my friend Gail here can read one of the other 2 letters that she got so that you can hear what the IRS said to her in response.
Hello everyone, and I'd like to share with you I am an American State National standing on the land and soil of Connecticut. And my name is Gail Ann Saxa, and I have published the declarations. The initial one was the 1779, which I'm sure will be talked about in a minute. But that just stated who I was on the land and soil, no longer part of the incorporated government. The first letters that Angela talked about, not only did we send to both of the Internal Revenue Service locations, but we also sent it to the Secretary of State. And that was to be published. It was our political status. It showed who we were now as we were declaring making our declaration of who we are. The letters, the initial letter said, this letter is to inform you and to state that I revoke my election to pay federal income taxes as of whatever date that was. And I went back 10 years. You can go back 10 years. I made the mistake that I needed to do so, having determined that I was never actually a volunteer warrant officer in the Merchant Marine Service, and clearing the confusion about what a withholding agent was, and now knowing that I am not a withholding agent and never have been, when I signed previous 1040 and other federal tax forms. I now revoke my election to pay any federal income taxes from the above date and going forward. And I got responses. The initial response was from Kansas City, and I was like, wow, that's strange. But they said they needed 60 days, and I got 2 or 3 notices of that. Finally, in, I forget what date it was, but after, it was later in the year, it was October of 2022, but I sent my letters of revocation in 2021. And it said, finally, thank you. It said, dear taxpayer, which I am not. Thank you for your correspondence, which we received on later date in 2022. We received the information you provided and determined no action is necessary on your account. And they also provided a voucher, which we usually get with bills, but they basically said, cut it out and return it if you are making a payment, which we weren't, and it has our social security number and all that information on it. And basically what we've determined is that when they finally came to the end of looking at all of our records, they determined we were correct in what we did. And there are many who have done this. And at this point, I don't expect to ever see them again. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Yeah, so I appreciate that, Gail. She was sharing with you the direct correspondence she got from the IRS, and as did I, and there are a number of others on the Connecticut Assembly who've had the same process occur, where we get 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 letters that virtually nothing is happening in terms of any harm or threat to us by the IRS, because they know that we are not supposed to pay federal income tax unless we are a federal employee or dependent of the federal government. And as land and soil Americans, that takes us out of that status. So I'm emphasizing this with a little extra time on this topic because it's one that's being approached from so many different angles by different patriot groups right now. There are multiple ways to approach the IRS to step away from paying income tax. And I'm unsure as to the outcome that all those people get the way they do it. But I wanted to be crystal clear about how we do it from the land and soil jurisdiction, that we first declare our change of status to American. and then notify the IRS that we're withdrawing from the voluntary paying of income tax. And that works. It works every time, and no one's in jail. I imagine if someone owes past taxes, there might be a slightly different response, but I have not learned of anyone with that particular circumstance. Everyone that I know of that has had these letters returned did not owe back taxes already. There are people in our assembly who have not paid federal income tax for upwards of 10 years, and again, they're free to go about their lives. So just wanted to emphasize that. And should you choose to reach out to us and become a state national, there is so much information available to you through our social media intranet, through our training programs.
We have a question,
Okay, great.
and it is, how can we stop the government from taxing their Social Security retirement checks?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. You can't stop what system they've already set up. So we get this question all the time about federal benefits, basically. As a state national, if you declare your change of status, you can still receive Social Security. I know of no one who has succeeded in changing any of the withholding on the Social Security, though. There's withholding in there for Medicare, that's my understanding. They may even withhold for tax, even after you've sent your letters to the IRS and said you're no longer paying tax. That will not change your withholding. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that you can't try to change it. There are many people on our assemblies across the country that try new things in communicating with the de facto government and trying to change what's done to them. So that's an opportunity you could certainly take once you're on the land and soil, which makes it clear that you've stepped out of their jurisdiction, and you can reach out to other nationals all over the country who can share their own experience if anyone else has tried that. But I can tell you that even in my own mother's case, she's a state national, but she continues to have withholding from her Social Security. And because we don't file income tax returns for her anymore, she will not get that refunded back to her at the end of the year. This is a point of distress for many nationals. Stepping outside of the income tax system does create a bit of a complicated web for a lot of people. One of them is for people who are continuing to work, because you may work for a large employer who insists on withholding taxes and won't cooperate with you if you tell them, I'm no longer paying income tax, don't withhold anything from my pay, I assume the responsibility for that. There are many employers, especially large corporations, that will resist that, and they will argue with you. So once again, we do have multiple strategies that can be tried with your employer to change the withholding to zero on your paycheck. And again, it's very different for each person in terms of how they go about it and how they succeed. Some people choose to do a 1099 contractor status with their employer. That's one way to be able to choose the amount you want withheld as zero. There are other ways to go about it as well. And some people, like my son, for example, allows a $25 withholding from all of his paychecks that he knows he will not be getting back, simply because his employer's accountant was very resistive to having no withholding, and my son chose not to go into battle with that and try to fix it or change it. But again, we self-govern. We decide the level that we want to go to correct all of this tangled web that the de facto government has imposed on us against our will. Some of us push a little harder against the bureaucracy to pull out of it. Others don't push back at all and simply step out and don't pay the federal income tax and abdicate whatever withholding has been taken out of their pay or their Social Security. So it is a difficult point, but it's very personal. It's a self-governing issue as to how you want to handle that. But you'll have lots of support from many other Americans on the land and soil who may be in the same boat as you once you've corrected your status. So hopefully that answers your question the best I can. It is not easy to live a life outside the system. Not easy. It should be simple because that's the way we're born, free and simple. But because we've been, against our will, entangled in this corporate net for so long without our knowledge, we don't even realize how difficult it is to step out until we try. And so personally, I can tell you that I choose to do it only at certain layers. Okay, so for example, I chose to completely revoke my pharmacist license. I was a pharmacist for 25 years. That's a license that is given to me through the state incorporated government. And because I'm a healthcare provider who is covered under many, many healthcare provider laws, statutes, regulations, I'm considered a federal and state citizen, basically, by having and using that license for my income. So that's a situation where the entanglement's pretty deep. This is true for doctors and nurses as well. And I think it's unique to healthcare in particular. So, for example, a beautician's license may not be an issue at all. Like I mentioned before, a trucking license or something. Not so much of an issue in terms of paying federal income tax. But a license like by a doctor, nurse, pharmacist, APRN, that type of job, you are actually under federal law. So we are dependents of the federal government at that point. I chose to revoke my license and leave my career. Not everyone can do that or would choose to do that. Doesn't matter which you choose. You can still become what you were born to be. You can still become a land and soil American and work with your license. Some state nationals choose to let their driver's license expire. They choose to let their car registration expire and drive without those de facto things in their pocket. Those people are going to face a possibility of coming into contact with law enforcement. And at that point, they need to be prepared to deal with that while still staying on our jurisdiction. That's complicated. I choose to keep my driver's license and keep my car registered. So again, the web is tangled. If I keep trying to step out of all of these registrations and licenses, I do expose myself to more possibility of coming into contact with law enforcement and courts. And personally, I choose to stay out of both of those. I choose to live peacefully and lawfully until we find a way to either have enough of us that say enough is enough, we're not doing this, where they can't put us all into the courts, right, or in jail or whatever, or the whole thing gets resolved by some particular means, because we're all fighting from different angles, right? Who knows? However it gets resolved, I choose to not poke that bear. But that's up to you. Again, we are self-governing. We make our own decisions. And that includes the decision of whether to be overt in everything you do about being on the land and soil and revoke everything related to the de facto or not. Pick and choose. And there is a way to still be part of our assembly, be part of the decision making, be part of the progress and the rebuilding of the original government without having to give up all of the things within the current de facto system that you may like. For example, like your Social Security check, right? Like your job and your paycheck. You don't have to give those up. That was what I chose to do because my circumstances allowed for it. It's completely a self-governing issue. Okay. So, just real quick, corporations cannot address living men and women as living, we're in different jurisdictions. Corporations and living men and women are in different jurisdictions. So The corporations cannot really address us in contract. They have to do it with another corporation. Corporation has to do contract with another corporation. We as living men and women, however, can choose to enter into contract with other living men and women or with corporations if we choose. We have the right to choose. Corporations are kind of locked in. They can only do business with other corporations. And this is why they incorporate our names, so they can use us for business. Okay, I'm not going to belabor that point too much. The BAR, okay, the BAR stands for British Accreditation Registry, and that all lawyers, even here in the United States, pledge allegiance to the Crown and the Bar Association second. So if you hire an attorney, you are their last priority. Our courts were taken over in 1954 by British equity courts. Common law is no longer recognized in their courts. So common law or public law is the law that we on the land and soil live under. That's different than the law you face when you walk into a courtroom today. And that's regardless of whether it's a municipal court, if it's traffic court. Man, they've managed to subdivide their courts into such a system that's very complicated and difficult to navigate. And in order to stay on the land and soil, when you walk into their courtroom, you have to be very well prepared for that, because they will suck you back in to their jurisdiction so quick and you don't even know what's happening. So again, I prefer to stay out of the courts if it's at all possible. Okay, so you're not required to pay taxes. We talked about this. If you have a chance to look up the Dun and Bradstreet numbers, this will verify to you which the fact that your state government and all the agencies underneath it are all incorporated, as are the actual elected offices. So the office of the governor of the state of Connecticut is a corporation, the Secretary of State, and so on down the line. And you can verify that through the Dun and Bradstreet website, where corporations are all given a code number that is a universal code number identifying all corporations. So even every town and city has an incorporation number as well. I want to mention the GMEI utility. This is a website more and more people are coming aware of. So GMEIutility.org. If you go to that website and you type in the search bar, it's going to ask you to make an account, but you don't have to. You can just go to the search bar, type in your social security number with the dashes, and hit search. And what happens is you will see a list of all the corporations that have been formed using your social security number, your name, as an asset. And so this is how you can verify, in fact, your name is a bought, sold, and traded asset used by corporations and to form corporations. So your name is incorporated. This is an example on the slide of what the GMEI utility will bring up if you type in state of Connecticut, and it shows you that it has a corporate status with a code number attached to it, where its headquarters are, and so on. So our state of Connecticut is a corporation. And just for full disclosure, I did actually receive an email from the GMEI utility. They're changing their website, and this will be interesting because I checked it out a couple of days ago and it still had not launched, but it's called the DTCC GMEI. So it's going to be under this new URL, gmei.dtcc.com. Like I said, it hasn't launched yet, but when it does, it'll be interesting to see if we can still put in our social security number and look up this information. I wonder if they're perhaps going to try to hide this information from us again. But as of yesterday, when I checked it last, you could still look up your social security number on the GMEI utility. So I really encourage you to do that on your phone right now, and you will be surprised. You will see corporations in your name in France, in Germany, in Siberia. I mean, it's unbelievable how our names get bought, sold, and traded. So this is just a quick example of how, for example, when you get your mail, look at your mail and see how your name is written, because you get a clue as to which corporate use your name is under with that company that sent you that mail. So as a living person, your name, or as a living people, we like to say, your name should be first letter capital and the rest of the letters of your name lowercase, and include your middle name or middle initial. But when they corporatize it, they capitalize everything. And that's a clue. If you look at your birth certificate, you'll see it. Look at your social security card. Look at all your mortgage documents, your bank statements, your credit card statements, the front of your credit card. All of it is in all caps. And that's an indication that your corporate entity has been used to enter those contracts. So just real quick, in the middle would be your living name. So in here it's John William Doe. And what happens is at a foreign level, your name is all caps. It's trademarked as a corporation and used for all different types of corporate use. And then on the right, the domestic use will be using your name under what's called a transmitting utility. That's a domestic, I guess, a domestic corporate use of your name. And your name will have your middle initial, usually with a period after it, and that's the domestic corporate entity versus the foreign corporate entity on the left. Okay, so I'll just touch on this briefly. The Pledge of Allegiance, we don't take oaths or pledges on the land and soil. So when you pledge allegiance to the Old Glory flag, you're actually repeating an oath to the de facto government, and so that's not what we do on the land and soil, basically. So the power structure that I alluded to earlier, I just want to give you a visual of that here on this slide. So this is the way it's supposed to work, and in the land and soil jurisdiction, in the way our assemblies are set up, this is the way power is structured. People are at the top, so guess what? You have more authority for decision making in your state and county than the President of the United States does. You have more authority than the governor of your state does. And for many people, that'll initially blow their mind. They'll think, what do you mean I have more power than the governor? What do you mean I have more power? Well, you do, because you were born under the Creator. No one comes between you and the Creator. That's the way the original government was meant to stand. So if you put a governor between you and God, we're mixed up. We're completely upside down. So we're at the top. We need to claim that back, and we need to do it peacefully, and it will take time. It's not easy, but we have to stand firm, learn who we are, and believe in this. The city, county, state come below us as individual people. The Federation of States and the American States Assemblies, that's what we will form. Right now we have a federation that has a head of state. Eventually we're going to reform that federation from the states upward rather than from the federation downward. A lot of this process has been very grassroots with just a few people starting it. Now it is spreading like wildfire, and we're regaining our ability to establish a fully functioning government, including this Federation of States, to which we will send representatives from each of our assemblies. And then we have the States of States, which is your subcontractor. The Confederation of States, again, a union of representatives from all states. The Federal Republic, and then below all of that, the territorial and municipal subcontractors, and that's who we know today as our government. The bottom of that triangle is what we see as the top of the triangle. So see, this is how we see it today. And this is what we need to undo in our minds. Now, I've been a state national for a year, and I am honestly, just in the last couple of months, starting to really feel at the cellular level that this is wrong. It's taken me a whole year of almost daily study to see myself at the top of this pyramid. But I'm starting to understand it. And I'm comprehending that that does not mean that I need to be the boss, being at the top of the power structure, it doesn't mean that there has to be anything egoic about that. It means that I recognize my place under the Creator, and that I am not only privileged to be free and to have rights, but I have responsibilities. And that's huge, because all of you who are patriots who've been taking action and seeing that you can change things by taking responsibility, getting off your couch, and don't wait for someone to rescue you, you have the stuff to do this. You have the stuff to get back to the top of the power structure in an organic way, to believe that in a peaceful way, and be part of this education and change that we are affecting across the country. So we have this is a pretty complicated slide that online you may have trouble reading it, but basically what we have on the top of this is the three branches of the American government the way it should be. This is the founding system. It should be the Union of States, that is from 1776, the Federation of States, which is sending a representative, right, from all the states, and then from those two we get the Confederation of States. So all of those things above the line in the middle of the page there, all of the things above are land and soil jurisdiction parameters, basically. And below the line we have our subcontractors, again utilizing the three constitutions, the constitutions that tell those branches of government what their powers are, and only those powers, and that they're to stay in their little boxes and perform only the tasks and responsibilities that we the people have designated. That's what we have below the line. So we have the States of America from 1787, which is a federal republic. That's been in absentia. The British territorial subcontractor and the Papist municipal subcontractor. So right now, our Washington, D.C. government is municipal. It's beholden to the Vatican, to the Pope. That is the banking system that is funding it after the bankruptcies. Whereas our military falls under the British territorial subcontractor, and that is the sea jurisdiction, as do our courts. Also, they're the sea jurisdiction. So those two subcontractors, the British and the Papist, are in play right now. They're not following the constitutions that are supposed to control them. We, the people, have been asleep at the wheel over generations now, since 1860, allowing them to far outstrip their powers. And now we're waking up and we're standing up and we're saying, you know what, we're not lost at sea, we're not dead on paper, we're living men and women, we're at the top of the power structure, and you need to get back to your enumerated powers under the Constitution. If you go to our website, you'll see this document and you can read it in more detail. Also, our Federation's website, which I'll give you the URL for later, that has a vast array of information and documents like this to educate yourself. And that's another responsibility, by the way, of self-governing people, is you must educate yourself about what all this means. How do we restructure everything to the way it was supposed to be? And I just want to, again, this is a complicated document which you can find on the Federation website, but these are the different titles for a living man or woman that you may have been assigned without your knowledge versus the one you really are. So the American State National is what you're born to be. That's the land jurisdiction, and it's what those of us who have proclaimed it publicly again are regaining. The state citizen, that is also on the land and soil jurisdiction. That is what you are if you do some additional paperwork, additional publications or declarations that says, I do not have dual citizenship. So you can be an American State National and still a U.S. citizen. There are people that do that, and those are the people that I referred to earlier who say, for example, still work for the post office. They're a state national and a U.S. citizen. They have obligations to both. The state citizen on the land is obligated only to the land jurisdiction, is only an American, no longer a U.S. citizen. That state citizen is eligible to be a juror in our courts, our common law courts, and to run for any elected office within the assemblies. The federal United States citizen, the territorial United States citizen, and the municipal citizen of the United States, those are all the things that you might be, without your knowledge, from birth, because of that registration of birth. You've been assigned to one of those status. So we've proudly said all our lives, yes, I'm a U.S. citizen, but now, from the perspective of reforming our correct government, that's not something necessarily to be proud of. That's something that has confused us and defrauded us. And so we have to understand the difference. This document found on our Federation website has an explanation under each one as to what exactly they mean. I highly encourage you to study these. So the remedy. You're sick and tired of the fraud. You're tired of being lied to. You can't believe that your birth certificate turned you into a corporate entity that's been bought, sold, and traded. If you're sick of paying federal income tax when you know you shouldn't be, or when that money is being used to perpetuate crimes against humanity, well, there is a remedy. This is the remedy. And to all of you who are in patriot groups that are bumping up against this concept, there are many of you out there who are coming at our subcontracted government from the federal and state level. You're coming at them from so many different angles, and it's amazing to see you exert your power. There are people filing lawsuits at every level against our government, correct? You're probably participating in some of that. Or you're choosing not to participate in something that you typically have been forced to do against your will. All of you are bumping up right against the ultimate solution. And let me tell you, this is it. Returning to the land changes where you stand when you are speaking to our government contractors. It changes your voice. The government employees see us differently when we change our jurisdiction. They do see us differently.
Okay, we have a question.
Yes.
Someone wants to know if you have any links to anyone in Canada or groups up there that may be doing something similar to this.
That's a really good question. Not off the top of my head, but I know there are. What I would encourage you to do to start with is, since I don't have an answer, at the end of this, I'm going to give you the URL for our Federation website. And on that website are thousands of articles written by our fiduciary, Anna von Reitz. And she writes about what's going on in other countries. And so you can do a keyword search when you go to that website and type in Canada or Canada assemblies, and you can see if she's written about what's happening in other countries. And I know she's written about Canada. So there are about over 4,000 articles that she's written that you can search through. And you may get your answer through those articles. I will research that myself, though, and maybe we can post it on Soup Mama's website here and have your answer in the near future. So again, I can't reiterate enough how important it is to change where you're standing in order for your voice to be heard differently and responded to differently. And let me tell you, these IRS letters that I just showed you and had read to you, that's a perfect example of how simply changing where you're standing and your awareness of who you are, and then you address our contractors, they respond differently. If you don't revoke that U.S. citizenship, you're always going to be seen as a dead corporate entity. It makes you voiceless. Returning to the land returns your voice. And it's that missing link. So let me give you an example of another person. you may know of Stu Peters, right? And I only mention him because I follow him, and I hear him say he wants to set up a citizen grand jury to investigate the crimes against humanity from the vaccines, right? And he's using that in reference to some specific people's cases that he's very interested in. And when he says that, I get excited because he's bumping up against this remedy. The citizen grand jury is the Land and Soil Common Law Court. And common law, I'm sure many of you have heard of other attorneys who have been fighting common law cases in our municipal courts for quite a while. And these attorneys who've revoked their bar association membership, they decide they're going to work under common law. And there are a few of them around the world that have been extremely successful. And I believe one of them is in Canada, and he's managed to win common law argument in a de facto court because he knows where he stands. He stands on the land, and he knows what language to use and how the language has been corrupted to trick us to come back to their jurisdiction. So it can be done. Unfortunately, it's being done at a very small level right now because only a few people are aware of it. But what we have here on our land assemblies is the solution. And we need people. We need participation, because the more we have participating, the more impetus we're going to have, the louder our voice will be. And the spreading of this message is huge. So sharing this video as much as you can is very helpful to spread the word so that people like Stu Peters, who are bumping right up against the answer, can cross that line and get it done. Because once every state has our courts set up, our common law court, we no longer need to settle any disputes in their municipal, district, superior courts. We don't belong there. That isn't where living men and women go. That's where corporations go to argue their cases. So we have to have our courts. And it can be done very quickly with the participation of just a few on each state. So on Connecticut, we're very close to that point of having a general assembly where we can have a grand jury. And at that point, the biggest challenge, again, is in numbers of people so that we can extend our reach and our representation beyond, the few numbers that we currently have. So participate, please. You don't have to jump in with both feet right away. Like I said, you can take advantage of our educational tools. You can just take that first declaration. We have a declaration that you can sign and publish that simply says, I've returned to the land and I am no longer a U.S. citizen, and you can stay there. But when you stay there, you don't have to change anything else in your life. But once you're there, you can participate in all our assemblies, be part of the discussion, get further educated, get further comfortable with what it means to be at the top of the power structure and how to do this peacefully. So we encourage and ask that you really consider at least that first step of coming back to the land publicly, and then go from there. And you'll have lots of support. All of us have been through this. We've all walked through fear. And let me add, from my own perspective, that this is a spiritual journey, not just a political one or a practical one. It's a spiritual journey for sure. And all of you who've stood up for patriot causes, you've gone through spiritual journeys to get that courage, right? To be able to stand out front, put your face out there, put your name out there. You've had to walk through some fire for that. And this is the same thing we're doing. We're at the cutting edge of correcting the mistakes. It's not easy, it takes courage, but I'll tell you, it's such a fulfilling journey to finally know that while I was miserable most of my adult life and feeling, I remember at the dinner table for the last 10 years saying, I'm just a slave, I'm just a slave. I don't feel like I have power over anything. And any of you who are parents, every time you turn around, there's a form to fill out for your kid. And it's a registration or a certification or this or that. And every time I was doing those forms, I was handing over my authority over my children to someone else. Registering my child for school takes away my parental rights while that child is in school. These are things that are worth standing up for and correcting, and we can do it. When we have enough people who've wakened to this power, we can make our own schools, our own emergency services, our own healthcare system, all of these things from the ground up in a way, or using what's currently in place and adapting it to actually use to help people instead of entrap them. Or put them in a for-profit system, which is really not what healthcare should be for sure. So again, I say this is the remedy, and it is the thing that most patriots are really close to figuring out, but that last piece has to be taken care of before you can do a citizen grand jury or call out any of these criminals for their crimes against humanity who are only serving in elected offices because we, the people, grant it to them. Well, we have to stop granting them more power than they should have. So we are reconstructing, like I mentioned, we're building our 4 pillars. One pillar, which every state, all 50 states currently has, is the General Assembly. Now, ideally, what we want is an assembly on every county in every state. That's ideal. Because then, guess what? No one represents you. You go to your county assembly. You get to speak and discuss any topic that's important to your community. You get to vote for yourself instead of watching your state legislator voting in a way you would never want them to vote. You get to vote. And by doing it at a county level, it's doable. It's not too big to handle. It's not too cumbersome. Doing it on a county by county level is the way to have your voice heard. And then you have a state assembly, and that's our General Assembly. So since we don't have enough people on the land yet to have a county assembly in every county on Connecticut, we have our state assembly first. But eventually, we'll have to expand that out to county assemblies. So this is already standing, folks. We already have them. You can start coming to our meetings. Just join us by changing your political status to land and soil. Non-U.S. citizen, American. Okay, the second is the International Business Assembly, and when we say international, that also refers between states, because on the land and soil, each state is a nation state. And so business between states is international. And of course, we've got to deal with our neighbors. We can't just live in our state and ignore everyone around us. That's part of being American. And then our General Assembly. Now this is really critical, and this is the one we're focusing on Connecticut here, to get enough jurors who are, by the way, state citizens, because they don't have dual citizenship, they're Americans. And by having Americans who are eligible to be jurors, we can actually have a grand jury and have a trial if we need to. And then the last pillar is our militia. And so all of you who immediately react to that word and imagine us walking around with rifles on our shoulders, that's another perversion of this word. The word militia simply means people. It's your community. So the militia's job is community cohesiveness. It's about communication, support, emergency services, charity, all of that would be done through the militia, and an arm of it would also be for defense. But that is not the only job of the militia. We would want to set up disaster response and all that. And again, if we can adapt the current system to under public law instead of under statutory law, then we can utilize the system as it is and pull it under our common law and make it our militia, part of our militia. So the fire service, the police, the ambulance service, and so on would all be part of the militia. And some of the roles that you can take if you come back to land and soil and you want to run for elected office as a state citizen are listed on this slide. So we certainly need jurors. That's our top need right now. Jurors have to also educate themselves on public law, common law, and be familiar with the common sense of it, because it really is common sense. You don't have to go to law school, trust me. You don't need to spend forever taking classes. It's a lot of common sense as well as moral sense under the Creator, following the laws of God and laws of nature. Nature's God, right? That's all common sense. And jurors, by the way, make decisions about what we consider to be right or wrong, guilty or not guilty, using our morality, our common sense, and our community, knowing each other. By the way, that's the other thing. Juries are not supposed to be anonymous. They're not supposed to be people you don't know. You're supposed to know the plaintiff and the defendant, because only by knowing people's character can you really fully judge evidence in front of you in the context of the people involved. But there are all these positions we need to fill. So we need you. Every state, by the way, no matter where you're watching this from, every state assembly needs you. On Connecticut, we're fortunate to have a small geographic state, so we're a very close group, tight-knit group, and we don't have many counties. Do we have 8 or 9?
8.
8. We have 8 counties, and we have a state national, at least one state national on every county right now, and some of the counties have many state nationals. So we are a fully standing represented state, and we have the luxury of that because we're small. Some states have upwards of 200 counties and don't have a state national on every county yet, so they've got a long way to go. But every state has an assembly. So we need you. We need you to help us work toward building these 4 pillars, toward educating. So this is another main mission. This is why I'm standing here today. We're reaching out. We want to educate our de facto government. We want to educate our Secretary of State, our law enforcement officers. We are not, again, looking to be poking the bear. We're not looking to create any kind of adversarial relationship. What we want is gradual shifting of power back to the people where it should be, and peacefully is our goal. Peacefully. And this takes time. This takes time. Those of you who are courageous patriots already fighting for a cause, it would be a spiritual journey to come to our state assemblies and recognize that charging in is not necessarily how we work. We are patient, we are methodical, we are thoughtful, we discuss things because, you know, 2 brains are always better than 1 when it comes to rational decision making. We support each other, and obviously we want to stay lawful and peaceful. So we are living people who are making the journey towards self-governance. And that's, by the way, another topic for another day, but self-governance is something we also discuss and take classes in, because learning to stop being a follower is a mental process and a spiritual one and an emotional one. It's fraught with fear. I can tell you I was very accustomed to being a follower on many levels, and it has taken adjustment and support from others to learn what true self-governance is. I have to control myself. I have to be responsible for my choices. What I say and what I do, I have to know the boundaries. I have to know where I end and you begin, so that I am not trespassing on you. This is the way for peaceful self-governance, and it can work. Everyone says to me, this is anarchy. What do you mean we're just going to eliminate our government as it is and start all over? It's not anarchy. Working from within first, knowing who I am and what I can do, what my talents are, what my limits are, is an integral part of interacting in my assembly. And we all help each other. And we identify each other's strengths and weaknesses. And we have to be honest about those. So I can't do everything. I'm not good at some things. And I have to be comfortable being told, that isn't your strength. You're better at this. Let someone else do that. And that's the consequence of knowing who I am and being responsible for myself. So it's a lot of, again, a lot of inner work as well as community work. Okay, so here's that URL I promised you. Our Federation website is TASA, T-A-S-A, AmericanStateNationals.org. And that website is jam-packed with educational materials, including some of the slides I showed you today are on that website. Anna von Reitz, like I said, is our fiduciary. She is also the wife of our head of state, James Clinton Belcher, and she writes articles prolifically about history as well as current events, political, financial, spiritual, you name it. It runs the gamut. So her articles are very interesting, very informational. Our documents, now those of you who are actually interested in coming onto the land, are easily accessible on this website through the 1779 document is there, as well as what we call our 928 documents. Those are the documents that put you completely on the soil and remove your dual citizenship as U.S. citizen. So the 928s are the second phase after the 1779, which is the first phase. It's available on our website as well. If you're on Connecticut, feel free to use our website and contact our coordinator, and you'll have a recording secretary reach out to you who can help you do this paperwork. You don't have to do it by yourself. And oh, by the way, I gotta mention this, because there are other people out there talking about moving to the land jurisdiction, offering paperwork that are declarations of change of political status, and charging you hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. We don't charge for anything. I have it right here on the desk. I'll give it away. You can print it off of our website. The only thing that costs money in our process is the publishing of the information. So you can choose to go a free route to publish, which would be through, if you're lucky, your county clerk or your town clerk. On Connecticut, I can't find a town clerk that'll publish my document. They tell me I only publish land documents. We don't take personal political status documents. So we've created our own public website, the LRO, that has a place for you to put your declarations for anyone to look up and see. And that has a nominal fee. I believe it's $50 to publish. And if you want help completing your paperwork, another $50 will buy you the time of a recording secretary to actually prepare the paperwork for you, where all you have to do is autograph it, go over it with the recording secretary and autograph it. So $50, not a lot. We also have a credentials card that we carry with our photograph and our state national status information. That is, it can be used as an identification form. Like I said, I still choose to have a state driver's license, but this credentials card links to that publication site so that law enforcement can look at your documents. You can also obtain a U.S. passport through the de facto government that says you are a state national in their documentation. So that passport, many of us on Connecticut have obtained it already, and that passport can be used comfortably for those of us who know we're on the land and want to stay on the land and don't want to whip out our driver's license that puts us back in the C jurisdiction. You take out your U.S. passport, it says you are a state national when they scan that, and it can be seen on the screen. So you can comfortably carry that as an alternative form of credential. But our credentials card costs $50 to have that printed and sent to you in the mail. So again, very inexpensive, and if you choose to publish on your own, it could cost nothing to do this paperwork. So make note of the websites. Please reach out to us via the websites. There's email addresses on there to reach out to us. Really grateful to all of you that have stuck it through to the end of this video. Share this video as far and wide as you can. and thank you for your attention.
Oh, please reintroduce yourself so that
Okay.
people know your name and everything,
Sure.
because there were quite a few people that said something, they wanted, I put your name in, but,
Absolutely.
and they
So-
wanted to know, do you have like a position or a title or anything with these guys
Should
too?
have said that right off the bat. So again, my name is Angela Merzen. Merzen is my birth name, not my married name or my de facto name. My de facto name is Ryan, R-Y-A-N, so all of my contracts say Ryan, but Merzen is the name I was born with, my family name. Angela is my given name. And I am actually right now wearing 2 hats for the Connecticut Assembly, Land and Soil. I am the treasurer as well as the outreach coordinator. And I'll do anything else that they ask me to do. So please join us. And, again, when you email through our website, you can even say that you heard my presentation. If you just say Angela, everyone knows who I am on our assembly. So you can always say, I heard Angela's presentation.
And
And
that's
I
Connecticut.
hope to meet you.
ConnecticutStateNationals.org.
Connecticut State Nationals with an S.org. Right. That's it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you.
Okay.
And, all right, guys, I'm gonna turn off, they said this was amazing. Thank you for the information. Thank you for broadcasting it. They're all very grateful. So guys, if you have any questions, please feel free, to shoot me a message or shoot me an email, soupmamaofficial@gmail.com, and I can forward that on. Otherwise, you guys can check out their website, ConnecticutStateNationals.org, and send emails through there. But I'm going to jump off this live, and I will talk to you soon. God bless you guys. Love you all.
You are the